Hello my fellow Christian fiction lovers, welcome to another video. A few days ago I shared with you my favorite books from 2021 and it was very kindly asked by one of you to share my least favorite books from 2021. I don't read a lot of books that I don't like in some way. Like, I try and find the good qualities in books, but there's always going to be some. You can't read like 60 plus books in a year and expect them all to be good. Okay, so we are just gonna go, most of these are 2 and 3 stars. I really didn't read a lot of books at a 1-star level. I didn't read any. So the first book that, I can't remember if I read this at the very end of 2020 or the very beginning of 2021. This book was Between You and Me by Susan Wiggs, and I hated this book. I really did. Like, I don't know why I even finished it. It was about this med student who meets this Amish guy. It's not Christian fiction, and basically she helps save his sister or cousin or something after a traumatic like farming incident, and they end up falling in love, and it's weird, and I don't even remember like the main takeaway from the book. I really didn't like it. Next, some of you guys are gonna hate me for this one, but The Notebook was 2 stars, like 1.5 stars. I really did not like The Notebook by Nicholas Sparks. It was very hard to get through. Very, very hard. I picked it up at a thrift store. It wasn't something that was like on my TBR. I just saw it and I was like, oh, that's really popular. I'll read it. I wish I never had, because it was just so, like, morally awful. Hated the choices that the characters made. I thought like the way it began and ended with them like being older and him telling their love story, I thought that was sweet, but not sweet enough to make up for how they fell in love and the choices they made. And I just thought it was all so backwards and I really didn't like it. The next book I didn't really like was The German Boy by Tricia Vostvedt. And this isn't a very popular book. I got this book at a thrift store and for literally like 2 francs. It was such an interesting concept of a story, and there were a lot of times I just wanted to yell at one of the main characters and be like, just tell him you love him because he loves you too. And I really don't recommend even looking up this book because it's not worth it. I have since gotten rid of it. The next 2 books are biblical fiction, and they are authors that I've heard good things about, and I feel badly talking negatively about their books. But here we go. So the first one was Journey to the Well by Diana Wallace Taylor. This was her first novel. This was not the first book I read by her. The other one was Mary Magdalene. I also didn't really like that book. I was hoping maybe I would like this one because it was about the woman at the well, and it told her story of how she ended up like getting to the point where she had 5 husbands and was living with a man who wasn't her husband and like all of that. And I thought it was going to be really interesting, but the plot was so lacking. It was basically split into different parts with each man and like that she was involved with, and like the individual parts didn't have good plots, and so overall the plot just lacked a lot of connection. And then I feel like it also made a lot of excuses for her, and when she did get to the point of meeting Jesus, she didn't really like have any sins, whereas in the Bible I feel like it's very clear, and in the book it definitely made her out to be not her fault, like she was a victim in all of this, and I don't feel like it was as accurate as it could have been, and there was a little too much speculation about a woman who did exist and we don't know her story. Next is Miriam's Song by Jill Eileen Smith. This book I had high hopes for, not because I was necessarily looking forward to reading a story about Miriam, more so because I was looking forward to reading a book by Jill Eileen Smith, an author whom I was hoping to get around to. this past year, and I did, and unfortunately I don't think I will read another one of her books because this one was published in 2021, so it's very recent, and I was very underwhelmed by it. I read the majority of it all in one sitting, so I can tell you that the plot, it was very hard to keep me going. The plot really wasn't there. It followed the Bible like so closely that it just lacked the connecting threads that kept it going, and a poor plot just really turns me away from a book, like so easily. Okay, let's talk about some more. Next is A Time to Stand by Robert Whitlow. This was a like criminal justice kind of story about a white police officer who shot a black juvenile, and then an African-American lawyer ends up representing him in court. And that sounds like such a good premise for a story, right? And that's what I thought I was getting into. But the lawyer, she does not end up even taking his case until literally halfway through the book. And it's like a 400-page long novel. When she finally agrees to it, it is like begrudgingly. She's doing it as a favor because she potentially wants a job or something like that. And she doesn't want to represent him. And then finally she does get around to it. And so I just found like it was poorly advertised, or like the description didn't match the actual story and plot. It had so much potential and it delivered like none. It's really sad because I wanted it to be a good book and I tried to find ways to say it was a good book, but I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Next is Newton and Polly by Jodi Headland, and this is about John Newton, who wrote Amazing Grace, and his wife Polly before they were married, how they fell in love. I found the character development of John Newton so poor. Polly basically did not develop as a character at all, except to mature a little bit and realize that John Newton before he was saved wasn't good for her, but that was it. And also, this is something I harp about all the time. If you're a returning subscriber, you will know this. If a character doesn't gradually progress throughout the story, it's not a good story. If all of a sudden, like 3/4 of the way through the novel, they go from this awful person to this amazing person, that is just not accurate. Nobody flips a switch like that. Every little change that happens in your life happens over time. It happens because of prior choices you made, people you have met. It doesn't just like, boom, I'm a completely different person today because of this one thing. That's not how it works. Maybe it's like there's this light bulb moment where you change and start making changes, but you just don't become a perfect angel overnight. Like when you become a Christian, it's a struggle, man, especially if you've been living a sinful lifestyle. And so I felt like that was so poorly represented in the character of John Newton, and it could have been like there was so much potential to show how it is so very hard to get out of the struggles of temptation that you have just been giving into for years and years and years, your whole life, and then all of a sudden you have to say no to these things that were like second nature to you. And that was just a missed opportunity, in my opinion. Wow, I had a lot more to say about that one than I thought I did. Next, we'll just do 3 more of these very quickly. So next is A Touch of Gold by Annie Sullivan. This was a fantasy. I'm not very big into fantasy. I don't really have a complaint against it. It was a pretty cute love story. I'm not the biggest fan of fantasy. I think if you want some very like light fantasy, this would be a great book. And it's also not that complicated to follow, and the characters are really cool. And yeah, and they go on an adventure in a ship and search for treasure, and it's based off of Greek mythology. So I'm actually talking this book up to you. Like, I think it's actually a decent book if you like that genre. Next was Dearest Josephine by Caroline George. This was a wacky book. I liked it. It touched me when I finished, and it was really cute, but it was so weird. And I think I talked about this in my fall reading wrap-up or autumn reading wrap-up, whatever. The entire story is read via emails and letters. And that type of story just really irks me, because the way that authors write emails and letters, nobody writes letters and emails like that. Like, the way I write an email is not, it is not a narrative. If I'm telling a story in an email to a friend, it is not a narrative of, I said this way, and then they said this way. It's not a novel. It's just a story. This is what we talked about, this was the outcome. Like, I'm not the only person that does that, right? And so I just felt that that was not accurate. I've used the word accurate a couple of times in this video, but it just wasn't there for me. So that's my biggest like gripe with that book. And then finally, we will talk about Letters from Skye by Jessica Brockmull. This is not Christian fiction. Similar to The Notebook, the moral choices the characters made in this book were so bad. It's basically about this woman who, she's married, and she begins this letter correspondence with a young like college student who is a fan of her poetry collections that she's published, and they end up falling in love. And it is an interesting story, and if you like, and if she wasn't married, it would be such a cute love story. But like, she ends up having an affair, and I obviously cannot get behind that. No one should get behind that. So I don't recommend that book, and I probably spent too long talking about it. Okay, well, I spent a lot longer talking about my least favorite books than I thought I would. I didn't think it was that many. That's it. Those were my least favorite and my reasons for some of them. But thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, don't forget to give it a like. And if you want to see more content like this and see me talk and say great things about books, go ahead and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video, whatever that is. Until then, bye.